Good morning, everyone. We're giving everybody a few more minutes to come on. We had some issues getting some of you in the room this morning, so just bear with us for another minute or two and we'll get started. Thanks. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us and for being patient getting into the room. We are really excited about today's webinar and really looking forward to sharing some great information with you today. You are in a webinar for assisting food businesses in a farm-to-table world. This is co-sponsored by the NC Growing Together project at the Center for Environmental Farming Systems and the North Carolina Rural Center. And you're going to meet our presenter, Dani Black, here in just a few minutes. So what we're going to do today is go through the GoToMeeting platform really quickly so that you know how to use it and how to ask questions and what to expect. We'll have our presentation and we'll take questions throughout the presentation as we're able to, but anything we can't get to during the presentation we will answer at the end. Just a few notes about NC Growing Together. We are a 5-year USDA-funded grant project working in North Carolina to strengthen and expand moving local and regional food into supply chains across the state and the Southeast. So webinars the fourth goal with the project, which is to help create supportive business environments for food and farm businesses statewide. To do this, we work a lot with the Small Business Center Network, the SBTDCs, and local and regional governments around the state through an initiative called Local Food Economies. This webinar is one of several that we've done this year for our 2017 series, and we've got 2 more coming up we'll let you know about at the end. So the GoToWebinar platform that we're using today automatically mutes you as a participant, so you will not be able to use your voice to ask questions. You'll see over on the right side in a sidebar a drop down that says questions. You can use that box to send your questions for the presenter to me, and I will make sure that Dani gets them as we go or at the end. You'll also, right below that box, see a handouts drop down that has a PDF that you can download of the slides we'll be showing today, so you can follow along and you'll have Dani's contact information and our information if you need it at the end of the presentation. Once the webinar is over, sometime in the next 24 hours, you will receive an email from us with a link to the YouTube video when it's posted online. And another copy of those PDF slides along with Dani's contact information if you need her. And that should give you enough information for us to get started. So I'm going to turn things over now to Dani Black. She is the founder and leader of Bigger Tables Consulting, and I'll let her tell you all about herself. Dani, give me just 1 second. All right. You're all good.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm not sure if you've got me hooked up, Emily. I'm trying to move through the slides.
Got it?
No, nothing's happening.
You having it now? There you go.
Hey. Good morning. Welcome. This is going to be a great challenge for me to figure out slidey things, but I'm really excited. Hi, I'm Dani Black, and I want to say thank you to Rebecca Dunning for this opportunity and for Emily Edmonds for a lot of hand-holding this morning and all through my learning process, and everybody else at NC Growing Together. I'm really excited to have this chance to work with them and pull all of this information together. They've done a lot of amazing work, some of which I'm going to share with you today. And if you haven't already, make time to dig into some of these resources that we're going to fly through. They've collected and developed a lot of amazing work over the past few years. Please note, any mistakes today are my own. I talk about this stuff all the time, but the slidey technology stuff is going to be a challenge for me, and I'm going to do my best. So good morning and welcome, and let's move through some information. So a little tiny bit about me. Before I moved to North Carolina in '96, most of my work was in service and hospitality. When I got here, I became more involved with food, and like many food entrepreneurs do, I worked around the needs of my family as a market gardener, baker, and cook. I ultimately owned my own restaurant for a time with a partner, and then did a lot of chefing and helping other people set up their own kitchens and culinary programs. So I've always done this on the side, and now full-time, my consulting work is with people planning food-based businesses and programs and facilities. I love this business, and I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I know the value of your work as small business counselors and mentors. Because I'm very strict about planning and preparation, I'm sometimes called the bubble popper in chief, but I'm okay with that. I want my clients to make their own new and creative mistakes and not repeat ones that I have made or I have seen others make. So I'd rather have someone resent me for slowing them down than call me later and say, help me get out of this. So just a little about where I'm coming from in my work. So yes, restaurants are absolutely businesses first. The Carolina Small Business Development Foundation estimates that food businesses make up 15 to 20% of their lending. And for you small business center folks, I suspect it's even higher. If you've ever worked in a restaurant or a food truck or waited tables for tips or washed dishes or peeled sweet potatoes for minimum wage, you know that feeding people, all the parts of feeding people, is uniquely challenging work. And then if you layer on all the dimensions of being a small business owner plus whatever other roles a person has, and the fact that somebody's probably staked their house, their kids' college savings, good credit, retirement plan, on the restaurant roulette wheel, it's huge. And so supporting these food-based clients requires some heavy-duty resources and education. Preparing for this opportunity, one of the things I did was survey a lot of small food businesses, and most of them had some kind of support either from a small business center or from SCORE, and you'll see some of their quotes and responses throughout the presentation today. What I'm going to share with you are some really unique perspectives about the restaurant world and some really important things to watch for in your work with food-based clients. So sorry, there we go. Okay, here is some great news. This is a lot of fun numbers which all say that food, especially here in North Carolina, is still a really good business to get into. That is $18.6 billion in restaurant sales this year in North Carolina. That was a projection for 2017. And North Carolina's numbers roughly follow national trends. According to the National Restaurant Association, food service is the nation's second largest private sector employer. So that's 1 in 10 Americans working in food service. This is more good news if you're planning to open a restaurant. In 1970, 25.9% of all food spending was on food away from home, so just over a quarter, and the rest was for food at home. By 2012, that rose to its highest level ever, 43.1%, and it's still rising. So as of 2012, for the first time, we're spending more eating out than on food at home. The Cornell School of Hotel Administration's 2005 study, Why Restaurants Fail, illustrates the fallacy of the 90% failure rate, and I know a lot of you have heard that. More recent studies draw the same conclusions as Cornell did. So in their study of 2,439 restaurants, about 26% failed in year 1, about 19% failed in year 2, 14% failed in year 3. So the longer they held on, the better their chances of making it. A connected survey determined that having a clearly defined concept was the most important factor determining success in businesses that were still open after 5 years. So we don't have a lot of time to dig into this study, but some of the things that jumped out at me in this study, successful owners who talked about their restaurants described their concept, can you see my air quotes here? So concept in terms of not only food, but also their operating philosophy, business operations, everything to do with employee and customer relations. Among the failed owners, concept was used only in terms of the food, so vegetarian or seafood. So this will come up again later, but just think about those different ways of approaching your concept when you're planning your business. Also of interest, the study found no examples of restaurants closing due to external forces. They conclude that success or failure is primarily attributed to an individual's preparation or lack of preparation. I thought that was interesting too. So these awkward pauses are me figuring out how to drive 2 boats with 2 hands. All right. Planning is more effective when you're not neck deep in something. It's when you're dreaming and planning that foundations are built to support investment. And it's never been easier to get into this business. Pop-up restaurants, food trucks, carts, food halls. There's a lot of scalable ways to dip toes into the restaurant world. And there's a lot of sources of financing. This didn't used to be true. And there's plenty of ways to start small, microloans, crowdsourced loans, angel investors. I'll tell you from experience as a former owner and a borrower and a consultant that not every lender is as conservative as I am or as I hope you are. So let's make sure these small businesses are on strong footings and ready for long-term success. So first, let's be sure we're doing really effective screening of potential owners for fitness in this work, and let's find ways to redirect people when we have real concerns. In my opinion, it takes kindness and courage to be honest with people when we think they aren't suited or ready for this work. If you caught the presentation in June on incubators, you heard PFAF's Eric Hallman say that he sees a need for better vetting of people in the food business, more redirection of people who aren't quite ready. I absolutely couldn't agree more. And he also talked a little bit about what happens at that 3- and 4-year mark, which we'll talk about later. I realize this is a big part of what you do, and I'm going to propose even finer filters and more speed bumps for your clients. Do they really understand what they're getting into? Are they being realistic about money, time, talent, energy? Do they have not just an entrepreneurial spirit, business mentality, but the technical skills required in the restaurant business? So if the principal is a seasoned chef, does that person also understand how the front of the house or service part works? If it's not a chef, does that person understand how the back of the house or the kitchen works? If it's a partnership, do they really understand what they're undertaking together? Do they have a good exit plan for ending the partnership on good terms or bad terms? They need to be knowledgeable about every aspect of this business to be successful. So not just food and service, but HR and management, finances, contract negotiation, PR, marketing, food safety. Help them understand where the gaps are and how they'll be filled. Do they need to study? Do they need to hire? Do they need partners? Do they need outsourcing? Are there places and people you can send them to now while they're preparing? And what's the homework that's specific to this industry that they need to do? Because there's a lot of weird things that can hurt you badly in this business if you don't understand them. Will the owners carve out time and space to be the CEO? What's the plan for their physical and mental health, physical and mental self-care? Cornell's study also indicated that effective management of family life cycle and quality of life issues were more important than previously thought in the growth and development and success and failure of restaurants. So let me say right off that I don't have all the answers. Clients need professionals skilled in business like you, and they need people who deeply understand the food business. They need lawyers, architects, accountants who are not just good at their jobs, but who also understand the food world. So one of the things I'm putting together is a resource list of professionals who understand this industry. And I'm going to share what I have so far and encourage you all to share resources. And hopefully together we can build a good statewide list. I'm open to suggestions, but I see a huge need for this. And I think in these days of Skype and GoToMeeting, we can work in bigger circles to help these folks. In business planning for years 1 or 2, the professional they most need is you, the counselor or the mentor. Does their concept make sense? Does it fit the market? Do they have a solid, realistic plan for production and costing and staffing and sales? Will their proposed space support the menu and the style of service they want? Are their construction and renovation and lease numbers realistic? Who are their contractors and service vendors, food purveyors? Are their projected costs and contracts realistic? What do they sell? What are their revenue-producing products? Prepared food, sit-down, takeout, fine dining, catering, breakfast, lunch, dinner, bar. Do they know what each of those means, not just in terms of revenue, but also in terms of costing analysis for each product? Make sure their business plan shows a deep understanding of their largest costs, staffing and food. We'll talk more about those in a bit. Really key, do they know how to properly cost menus and recipes? This is a huge thing to watch for. A restaurant owner or a chef should know at a glance what each item costs and how to charge for it. It's not magic, it's a skill. On my survey, one respondent said about costing recipes, whatever you think it's going to cost, double it and then save any leftovers. How well have they researched their target market? Are there enough customers there around to pay what they need to charge for as much as they need to sell? How well have they assessed their competition? Do they have a really good solid list of anyone who does anything they even might potentially do? Make sure they do a really good spreadsheet of similarities and differences. Can they clearly articulate who they are and what they do? They may also consider an expert in marketing and branding, especially somebody who's really good at social media. That's a thing you can't take for granted that you're good at these days. People like Annette Dunlap at NCDA and Jill Willett of Coaching for Cooks are really good resources. I've also seen outstanding workshops on the score calendars for this. So remember, going back to the Cornell study, a concept that encompasses all they do is a really key factor in success. So we want to get businesses off to a great start. Wait, I have skipped a slide, so let's go back. I told you we were going to reach the edge of my technical capabilities. There we are. So years 3 and 4. This is typically when everything changes, and that may mean success beyond their expectations, or it may mean hard times, but it's really unlikely that things are happening as they planned. Business owners need to be prepared for the expected kind of insanity of the first couple years and the surprises. Years 3 and 4 are typically when they come back to you for an update, or they go back to the lender to rearrange financing, or they come to me for an intervention. So these are really key. We know we're checking early plans for reality and adequate financing, but just like people don't like to talk about personal wills and healthcare directives, no one wants to talk about the possibility of the end of a dream. This is key planning work, though. I want to see clients planning for these later years, not just in terms of, quote, I'll sell more and get better at it, but with a really clear articulation of a growth strategy and an exit strategy that imagines all the possible scenarios. So responsible long-term planning considers things like, what happens if sales are off the charts and I can't keep up with the business? What does it look like to run a company that doubles in size? How does that change my management team or my staffing situation? Where are the benchmarks at which I would consider closing or leaving or selling? What happens if I find my best employees are stealing from me and I'm out of cash and credit? I'm not kidding about these scenarios, folks. These are things that I've seen myself with clients. And I so wish they had thought about all of the terrible things that could happen before they started, so that they're not shocked that terrible things can happen. So what if something happens to me and I can no longer do my job? What's the plan for that? What happens if my partner ditches me? What happens if or when I run out of money? What are my backup financing plans? And beyond what number am I unwilling to go? I think these are hard conversations. But when you're in the blender is not the time to think about the options, I can tell you that. So scenarios like these need to be articulated, laid out ahead of time, try to save considerable heartache. While I was pulling my notes together for this presentation, I found a story about this restaurant called Parachute in Chicago, opened in 2014. If you get a chance, check out the stories I've linked here, and there's stories about how they got started and hitting those new level marks. What's especially interesting to me is how their concept has changed over time. Remember, we talked about resilience and flexibility, but staying true to what you started, this is a really good case study that for me, reflects what I read in the Cornell study. The interesting story, though, is how they scraped together and struggled to put it all together in the beginning, especially with their financing. It's a really textbook how-to with a fascinating laundry list of disasters. So, a little reading for the side. Okay, this is my favorite part. Here is where clients start to really need a team in addition to business planning professionals. If a client is a home producer, they may just need guidance through the inspection process. If they are using a low-risk inspected kitchen, these have their own standard operating procedures and good support. If they're doing a food truck, they'll need guidance on the truck part, as well as with finding a suitable commissary kitchen if they need it. If they need a full commercial kitchen or production facility like PFAP in Hillsborough or Blue Ridge Ventures, those facilities can give inspection guidance. But all of these scenarios require food safety training, and most require certification. So make sure they connect with reputable training resources. ServSafe, which I teach, shameless plug, is one, and Safe Plates, which is taught by county extension agents, is another. Both are acceptable to inspectors. There are lots of links here which you'll be able to access on the slidey version. And if you need more information, absolutely let me know. I love helping people connect with the right rules. This chart, oh, no, sorry, getting ahead. Please hold. Okay, who inspects what you do? This is a chart of food and beverage jurisdiction guidance, and without question, it is my favorite food reference. It helps people navigate the gaps and overlaps between Departments of Environmental Health and North Carolina Department of Agriculture. I know that's something you work with your clients on, and sometimes it can be a struggle to figure out. It's roughly based on the product that they're making. Various combinations of ingredients and preparations might steer you to one or the other. I share this with you to say that it's not always clear and easy, but these guys are trying to make it better. And if your client is trying to do the right thing, there are people in both places to help them. When you get a chance to look at this chart, you will also note fried butter. You can find out who's in charge of fried butter if that's what your client makes. And just because it's a great resource I found along the way, I'm also including a link to Wake County's HACCP planning guide. HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point, and it's an extra layer of food safety planning your client might need if they're doing particular cooking methods that have more risk attached. So it's more of a food processing thing, but if they're doing special preparations, they need to know about this too. And please reach out if your clients need more support with this process. I love shared kitchens. Shared inspected low-risk kitchens are a relatively new phenomenon, but they have a long history in rural communities. I heard about Caswell's by listening to one of these webinars earlier this year. Tammy Carter and her crew are the epitome of making connections and creating resource for people and food making in their community. The two in Greensboro I know of are participating in really exciting programs, including the Kitchens Connect Business Incubator. Also, an incredible team of people providing resources for food entrepreneurs. Please let me know of others in your area so I can update this list. I want to hear your ideas about where we can keep these lists so we can crowdsource keeping them current. I would love for you to have them at your fingertips for your clients. And again, your client's best partner in navigating where they should be working is the health inspector. These kitchens that I've seen are clean and professional and organized, but I'll tell you, they give inspectors the willies. So please encourage your clients to be upfront and honest about what they plan to make so that they can get the best support. When your clients need commercial kitchen space, there are more options all the time. Here's a few. PFAP in Hillsborough is my favorite business neighbor. In a space where not long ago there was nothing, it's a thriving community of food entrepreneurs making really cool things happen. And they're graduating people, which is really, really cool. For a lot of food businesses just getting started, one of these might be the very best way for them to just build a business gradually and try out ideas in a really supportive environment. And again, there are lots of other, I probably should have mentioned that I'm coming to you live from beautiful Hillsborough, North Carolina, and I'm a little Hillsborough-centric and Triangle-centric sometimes, so please reach out and let me know what other resources you know about so we can share them with folks. If a client is buying or renovating a food truck, they need some pretty specific information. RDU Mobile Food Association, Charlotte Food Truck Association, Central Carolina Food Truck Alliance are all great places for truck startups to do research. If they're building or renovating bricks and mortar, they need architects and general contractors, and if they or your client don't have extensive food experience, they need someone like me or another advisor to make sure that their plan will support the work they want to do and guide them through the process. One of the things I hear a lot is people wish they'd had someone who understood this business to reconcile building codes, health department codes, and workflow. So site plan review is the process of submitting comprehensive plans to the Department of Environmental Health. So it's an opportunity here to really establish great relationships with environmental health specialists, or also known as health inspectors. Each county has someone in that department who's an expert at plan review, and that's the folks who review all the aspects of their bricks and mortar plans and also their proposed operations to make sure before they even get started they avoid mistakes that would be a much bigger problems down the road. So if you're assisting a client in this process, some things you can watch out for in design are the flow and food and service. The food and the service should drive the workflow where everybody goes to do what they do. That should drive the design. When people design spaces and do that backwards, they end up with pretty expensive mistakes. So make sure they're following a process. Materials, equipment, and finishes need to support the work. They need to look good, be easy to clean, and satisfy the Department of Environmental Health. So they need to know about those things. And then flexibility in design, especially for new operators or concepts, so that things can adapt if change is needed. Here are some things you should make sure your client has someone knowledgeable to review. Drawings, are they sensible and realistic? Again, does the site support their product? Do they understand the long-term implications of putting money into somebody else's building? Do the construction, equipment, and small wares budgets make sense? Are there architects, landlords, and contractors experienced in this field so they can keep mayhem to a minimum among them? And do they know how to resolve issues among conflicting authorities? Expensive mistakes I have firsthand knowledge of, completely avoidable. Concrete floors poured before data cables were run. Not enough prep sinks or hand sinks. A hood for a piece of equipment that didn't require it, and hoods are super expensive. A cafe built into the center of a building and not required to have a hood, and then when it became necessary, the building owner wouldn't permit going through the roof. Workspace in a galley that wouldn't accommodate the first two larger people that were hired to work there. Kitchen and bathroom surfaces that are difficult to clean and never look clean. So these are just some things that can be avoided with proper planning and review, and this is a huge subject, but I just want to touch on it to give you an idea of the things your restaurant clients need to be prepared for. And again, there's some links in here that will help navigate those conversations. This is really deep wisdom from a brilliant client after her first few years of business. So what else do your clients need to be prepared for? Let's go from here and talk about some really key pieces of operations that are unique in food service. Let's talk about how not to kill people, how not to get tangled up in regulatory stuff, and how to be sure to make money. My notes here say, how much time do we have? I totally geek out on food safety, so let's see if I can give you the short story. The main point is make sure that your clients take this seriously and figure out the right rules and follow them. All the rules have the same goal. If someone's going to get sick, don't let it be your fault. So people need to see food safety as a responsibility like any other part of doing business. They should seek out the health inspectors as mentors and guides in the regulatory wilderness. These guys really just want to help people do the right things to keep food safe, and everyone that I've worked with was a great resource, and I've worked with them in lots of counties. So if your client builds a good relationship with the county health department, those folks will be assets in site planning, inspections, and for training. And your clients need to cultivate a good reputation and good working relationship with them. You can also call those folks with questions and get good information, and every county website I've seen has great material and links. People who see these rules as a pain in the neck to be met in the cheapest way possible will always see inspectors as adversaries trying to catch them doing wrong, and inspectors see those places as wrongs to be caught. So that's not the best use of anyone's time and talents. If you have opportunities to redirect your clients here, that's great. And have them have the North Carolina Food Code at their fingertips, and then they can search for what they need to know. Even with good training, there's a ton of information they need, but it's all out there and easy to find. And again, food safety training is available and it's not optional. All food service operations are required to have a, quote, person in charge at all hours of operation who's a certified food safety manager. And then there's training for other levels and areas, including allergies. It is a heavy responsibility, and every time I hear of an outbreak, like last week's norovirus at UNC Chapel Hill, I think that's one person who didn't wash their hands well enough, or who maybe didn't know they weren't supposed to go to work sick. So we've already talked about health permits. Another big one is ABC permits for people selling alcohol. From tax stamps to service hours and intoxicated customers, the rules are many and strict, and the punishments are harsh. Just ask anyone who's had their permit suspended. Worse are the consequences of not taking this stuff seriously. So people who plan to sell alcohol need to do a lot of research. There's a lot of good information on the NCABC website, including good free training materials. Other regulatory things that can trip up a new business owner. Staffing, things like employing minors, they need to understand labor laws, immigration issues. Absolutely, we need to take I-9 forms seriously. This is not the time to be skirting immigration laws. Random things like minimum wage laws, rules about tipping and reporting tips, withholding payroll taxes. There's a dizzying array of taxes. Insurance gets complicated. Liquor liability, workers' comp. Clients really need an insurance agent who understands food service. And then leases. I'm not going to go into leases a lot, but I will just say that I think clients need a good lawyer who understands commercial food service real estate. This could be a subject for another presentation. There's a lot of things they need to watch for in leases that new entrepreneurs who are excited about opening a business might not know to watch for, but that can hurt them in the long term. So then also, I'll say again, partnership agreements. It's incredibly important to get this right. Make them have hard conversations, no matter how good friends they were or how long they've worked together. And then there's contracts for services, which we'll cover in a minute. One of my first real restaurant jobs was for Olive Garden. This was 30 years ago, and they used to say, hot food hot, cold food cold, bathrooms clean, and money in the bank. And I never forgot those words. Putting money in the bank and numbers on the reports every single day is so important. When I surveyed folks, I asked them what their most important financial tool is, and they said things like I know I should say cash flow statement, but it's so hard to do. Cash flow projections are so key. The projections and actual statements, sorry. It doesn't matter how much profit you're making on paper if there's no money for payroll on Monday morning. So make sure, if they're not good at it themselves, that they budget for a bookkeeper. As I'm looking at all of the information I want to share with you, there's so much technical information about finances in restaurant businesses that might actually make another presentation or something that I can make available to you separately, because I feel like we don't really have time to get into all of this financial stuff. But cash flow statements, paying attention to profit and loss statements so they know what their prime cost is or their cost of labor and food, and tying into an effective point of sale system. That's really key. That's another thing I think we might be able to crowdsource, and I'm going to work on that. So then labor and food are their variable costs, and those are the things that fluctuate as their sales fluctuate, but you probably already knew that. This was great advice given to me by a restaurant consultant who said it as we were bent over a trash pile in the parking lot because he had dumped out the trash so we could comb through and see what my staff had thrown away and assign a cost to it. I loved him for that lesson, and I think it's really important to remember that in this, especially when we're talking about trying to create the ability to spend more money on good local produce and things like that, which we'll talk about. It's super important to watch operating expenses. So again, there's a lot I could say about landmines in budgeting for restaurants. But I'm going to sail through some of this stuff today, and if this is an area of interest to you, I can share some information offline. Okay, so what's new in food? Pre-prepped meal kits. I know you guys see these all over the place. This is now a multi-billion, with a B, dollar industry, and many entrepreneurs are starting their own smaller scale versions of this. I think it's brilliant. It's probably not going to last forever, and it has some really interesting regulatory headaches for entrepreneurs. But I love that people are looking at meal delivery and personal chef services and new ways of doing food. That's exciting stuff that your clients might be looking at. Excuse me. Restaurants have gone through a lot of trends. I think now it's all about options and health-focused food. This means menus with choices. And even in fine dining, I'm noticing menus with sides on the side, giving people options to customize, which is interesting because it also lets them charge for things that used to be included. People are expecting to modify and substitute on their orders. Servers and chefs aren't surprised anymore, or they shouldn't be when people make these requests. Places will at least articulate their policies on these kinds of things. Menus also do need to consider allergies, and all staff should be trained in safe service for allergies, including how to be gracious when accommodations are requested, even if you think it's not a true allergy. There's a tendency to judge, and I have been guilty of it myself, but it's important to remember that there are safety issues, and we also need to remember the basic concepts of service and hospitality and train for those. I've had to say those words to myself many times as I see things like this. I'm going to show you a picture. This is an actual, whoops. There we go. This is an actual photo from an actual plating line. I've seen many that looked like this. I helped with a wedding recently where we had an elaborate diagram of people's particular needs, and then the guests all decided to sit elsewhere just before service. This is why food people drink. It's one thing to say that you accommodate allergies and special requests, but especially with the way people perceive health and nutrition these days, we do need to do it safely, and we need to do it graciously, and that requires a lot of training for both front and back of the house staff. Food halls are a thing too. These are the more sophisticated cousin of the mall food court many of us grew up with. They feature many mini restaurants and retail food vendors. Here in North Carolina, we have a few getting ready to open this year, and they're still working out the kinks, but they're going to be a great opportunity for people to test markets and concepts. I predict there's going to be even more opportunities with this. Food trucks. Jose Andres is my chef hero. If he thinks it's a good idea, it's a good idea. In 2010, Durham hosted the first Bull City street food vendor rodeo. Now, so that's 2010. Now, from American Meltdown to Zeke's Meats, there are hundreds and hundreds of food trucks crisscrossing the state every single day. It's also a fairly inexpensive way to test a concept and enter a business in a way that probably won't kill you if you fail, but it's not for everyone. It's tricky in terms of the rules, it's tricky in terms of logistics, and we don't have time today, but I have this hilarious wrap-up of all the rules from Raleigh, Cary, Durham, Chapel Hill, and how different they are, and it would make a food truck owner's head explode. I'll put that on my website so you can see it, because I think it's really funny, but I don't think we have time to go into it today. But food trucks are definitely a thing, and it's very exciting.
Hey, Dani.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question come in, if you have a second.
Sure.
To clarify a little bit more about the difference between a shared space kitchen like Caswell and a commercial kitchen. These two terms get tossed around a lot, shared use kitchens and commercial kitchens. So if you could talk to that a little bit, I think Barbara would appreciate it.
Sure, really briefly. There are much less stringent rules in a low-risk kitchen. So a commercial kitchen has all of the same equipment and finishes and rules and procedures as a full-service commercial restaurant. So if you have to follow the FDA food code in terms of commercial food production, they have everything you need. The rules are looser for home-based kitchens and shared low-risk kitchens because you're going to be making foods that are of lower risk. It's much harder to kill somebody with muffins than it is with scallops, for example. So if you go look at an inspected kitchen, these low-risk kitchens, they'll look like a home kitchen. You'll see much more residential equipment and less stringent. So they're super clean and easy to take care of, but they don't have the same rules about equipment. So it doesn't have the big scary commercial equipment. But they're mostly for people who are doing foods that are hard to kill people with. I hope that makes sense. And if you follow the links that I put on here, you'll see more about those, and you can reach out to me especially if you have clients who need to know which spaces are better for them. I'm happy to have an offline conversation about it. You can just reach out, Barbara or anybody. Okay, hope that helps. Okay, so this is the exciting part. This is what we're here to talk about. How are people spending their money? They are spending their money over time. People want to know where the food comes from. In North Carolina, we were local before local was cool, and it continues to be a major culinary influence all throughout the country. We're still doing it better than anybody else, in my opinion. What's new? Well, chefs are bringing new veggies. They're bringing back old foods with new preparations. Who knew about Crowder peas? You're seeing Crowder peas on restaurant menus. People like Working Landscapes in Warren County are getting collard greens back into school lunches. One of the things that's been fantastic for farmers is that more chefs are purchasing and learning how to use whole or half animals and helping people rediscover preparations and cuts of meats that we'd almost forgotten. So things like charcuterie and other preserved meats are gaining ground, and all those things that come with using whole animals. So soups and stews and casseroles and pot pies, and I think we're seeing trends towards more comfort foods, and that's because that's how we use those cuts of animals. I just saw rabbit and dumplings. Actually, I tasted it, didn't just see it, which is a fairly expensive meat in a really traditional recipe, which is delightful. So I predict you're going to see a lot more of this, comfort foods and using whole meat preparations. And people will relearn how easy it is to roast a chicken. That's my prediction. Ricky is one of my food heroes. His cooking has brought lots of attention to North Carolina seafood, especially fishes people had forgotten about. And it also reminded us that it's okay to cook something good until it's gone. That is also a new trend. They get their fresh seafood from the coast. When they're out of fish, they close the window, and people are learning that that's okay. So if local food is part of your client's mission, is it part of their marketing plan or some combination? How can we support them, and with whom do we connect them? Local food is more expensive, both in terms of raw ingredient cost, in terms of developing relationships with farmers, in terms of storage and preparation. It's a whole lot cheaper to have Cisco bring frozen burgers to your back door than to store and prepare meats directly from the farm, adapt menus, make those connections. It's a balancing act that each chef and business has to figure out for themselves. Local food transactions used to look like drug deals. Back in the early 2000s, I was driving out in the country to pick up milk and meet the beef guy out at a gas station in the country and trying to figure out how to balance the insanely high food cost. Decades ago, Ben and Karen Barker of Magnolia Grill were some of the first to partner with farmers and make really good food. They broke ground for chefs, and people who moved through that restaurant professionally are still making ripples around the state. And as a community of farmers started to understand the special needs of restaurants developed, restaurateurs started to develop the needs of farmers, started to understand the needs of farmers, and customers are starting to understand too. In our restaurant, when the steaks were gone, we cooked all the other parts of the cow until it was time to start over, and people started to get that. So this is one of the key things to know about local food. Chefs and kitchens who truly understand local food are nimble, they're creative, they're dedicated all year long, and they have to pay special attention to all of their other operating costs. It is a super complicated issue economically, and I also want to acknowledge that we're not there yet in the restaurant world. I think it's fair to say that true farm-to-table restaurants are outside the means of most of us, except as a treat, and I'm really happy for them to be here. As a chef and culinary director, I always chose to use the bulk of my food budgets on locally sourced meats because that's what's important to me. We need to find the middle ground. We've got to keep working where restaurants are and on the economic realities at the farm and wholesale and customer levels. And remember, the better financial shape a business is in, the more discretionary income they have. One key thing I want to note here is, and I'm skipping quickly because I want to make sure we get to everything, whatever your clients do and however they're able to make it work, make them market it. I've talked to lots of folks who are working hard to get good food on their menus, but it's not being mentioned anywhere, so make sure they're celebrating it. Make sure people know about it. This is a super cool map. If you haven't seen this before, go spend some time at the NC Growing Together website. This is a treasure map for food entrepreneurs who are interested in what's available in North Carolina. So this is magical. I love seafood. Access to fresh seafood instead of frozen shipped from around the world. I was an early groupie of Walking Fish, and I just think this is so exciting. And then meat. Even in the last 10 years, the access to meat for chefs is just incredible. That's a huge part of what NC Growing Together has been doing, and it's really exciting. Local hot dogs, just saying. I never thought I'd see that day. Sorry, I'm trying to get fast and I'm slowing myself down. Okay, really quick, I just want to pick out one of these because this is really cool to me. 2004 is when Eastern Carolina Organics began marketing and distributing wholesale Carolina organic farm produce. When they started, that was revolutionary, and they had 13 growers and 2 staff. They moved to a larger warehouse in late 2012, and since then they've paid out $9.5 million to their farmer owners, and they have over 40 growers and 100 customers. That, to me, is mind-boggling. I remember 2005 getting their little tiny list, and now we have so many options. We have so many options. I think of people like Cephs and NC Growing Together as midwives, shepherding all of these resources, collaborating, bringing up all this awareness and productivity. I just think there's going to be ripples for so long from all their good work. Here, I briefly just want to mention a lot of small food businesses will most likely be buying from some of these larger food service companies, and NC Growing Together has done a lot of work pushing and pulling and educating these folks and connecting them with smaller farmers. One of the things I want to mention here is GAP certification. That means Good Agricultural Practices, and it's a certification that most wholesalers require of their farm suppliers. Farmers who don't have it can continue to sell direct to consumers and restaurants, but that certification is important for food safety. And again, I'm going to skip through some of this stuff, but I got some really important information here for you from health inspectors about approved vendors and what it means to them and how you can talk with your farmers about safety. So again, I'm going to skip through some of these things, but it is important information and you'll have it in your PDF. I apologize. I know we're getting close to the end of our time, and all of these pauses on the slides have. This ad was really fun to find. Paul and Sarah and his crew at American Meltdown have built a successful food truck and a successful restaurant. They deal every day with the realities of staffing in all kinds of situations. This was the first answer to the first question on my survey. The question was, what do you wish you'd known before you started that you had to learn the hard way? I almost spit my coffee out when he said this. And of course, it's not completely true, but it's a really good window into what restaurant staffing can be like. I'm skipping over a slide that talks about the essay that Andrea Rusing recently published about farm labor and food folks and fair wages, because I don't want to gloss over it and kid around about it. I really do want to share it. So I'll put it on my website. I think it's important information that maybe we can talk about in another conversation, perhaps on Facebook. So of course there are two sides to this coin, and if you've ever worked in food service, you understand. So what do your clients need to hear about staffing? Tell them this: it's way more expensive than you think, so budget more. Turnover will be dramatic and disruptive until you know what you're doing, so concentrate on your core staff. It's harder than you think it is to manage people, so have a plan to support you in management. Most restaurants and other small food businesses are, I say, they're de facto social service agencies. They're more like dysfunctional families than like staffs, so be prepared for that. And also, everything's going to fall apart on occasion, so your clients need to hear that they may be spending their birthday or their wedding anniversary cleaning up from a flood or an overflowing grease trap, because the buck stops with them. They need to be prepared to keep a smile on their face when they're greeting customers because their dishwasher just called from jail and they're going to miss their son's basketball game because they're washing dishes. Again, so the realities of working in the restaurant world, they need to be prepared to do every single job. In addition, every time someone makes a mistake, the stakes are really high. Yelp and other review sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media, health inspections, everything is public. So they need to be ready for this. They need to be prepared. It hurts when you get a bad report card. This is where it's helpful for them to maybe have a marketing expert involved. This is a good place for them to spend time. So in the end, although I said I'm the bubble popper in chief, I am also a Pollyanna. I love when people follow their dreams. I love helping them get there. I love working with a network of people who support them in all kinds of ways. And really good things can happen when they have solid business plans. So if we make sure people have all the tools they need and build strong businesses, they're going to do well, they're going to do good, they're going to be successful, and everybody wins. Thank you for listening. I know we're a little bit close to the end time. I really appreciate you being here, and thank you for all the hard work you do. I really hope that the experiences of these food entrepreneurs is helpful to you and gives you confidence in dealing with restaurant clients. I want us all to be good judges of aptitude and fitness and good collaborators. So you'll have access to these slides, and I really do want you to reach out, and I'll reach out to hear some about the ways that we can crowdsource lists of some of these resources for food clients. Yeah, so I want to save time for questions if we have it, but please consider me a confidential resource. Email me with any questions you or your clients have, and yeah, I think that's all I have. So if Emily wants to work her magic and talk about questions.
Great, thank you, Dani. I have one question I'm going to run by you. Before I do that, I want to just mention that NC Growing Together is putting the finishing touches on 3 directories. One is co-packers in North Carolina, one is food hubs in North Carolina, and one is commercial and shared kitchens in North Carolina. So those will actually be out and published probably no later than the end of this month. So if you want to crowdsource once you see those and add anything that we might have missed, they'll be online, they'll also be printable, and we will make sure that y'all get notified when they go up, okay? The first question I have to run by you, Dani, is a question from John on whether or not you're aware of any successful community-supported fishery models like CSAs for North Carolina seafood.
Yes, I don't know if you can go back to that slide, Emily, that lists Walking Fish, NC Catch. I don't know. I know Walking Fish is a very successful CSF. I don't know of others because I love them so much. That's all I've done, but I know there are others. So Walking Fish comes up to the Triangle at least once a week. They're in Raleigh and Durham. I could do a little research if you want to drop me an email and we'll figure it out together, John, because this is something I love. But that's what Walking Fish has been doing for several years, and I was an early adopter. And so, yeah, it's very cool. It's potluck. You buy a share, and then you show up, and you get whatever fish you get. You get a choice of getting the fish whole or getting it filleted and cleaned and ready to go for a few extra dollars. And it's just been a miracle to me having that for years. Hope that answers your question. But definitely reach out, and we'll find some more together and post them.
Awesome. Thank you. That is actually the last question that I had. We answered the other one. I do want to remind everybody that the next webinar in the series is October 10th. This is trademarking for food and farm businesses, which I think will be useful to many of you, as we've seen so many food and farm businesses have trouble with that. And November 13th, we will have one with a couple of culinary programs at community colleges that are actually using local products in their education, offering courses, and also using them in their on-campus dining as a market for local producers in their communities. So I want to make sure you're aware of those. This webinar and the slides will be posted on YouTube and on our website, and we will email you all of those resources and Dani's contact information. Yep, Leslie, that's where I was going. I'm going to pull this slide back real quick. You can write down Dani's contact information here. Check out her website at biggertables.com if you have more questions, and we'll also make sure we send this contact information to you in the email with all your links after. All right, if there are no other questions, we will go ahead and close it out. I want to give a big thank you to Dani for doing such a great presentation for us today. Dani, we really appreciate you, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes of these conversations. So thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you for coming.